Hello, everybody. I made it this time. If you noticed the transition from the last one, I might have had a few technical difficulties, but Ryan and I made it this time. We're going to give everybody a few more minutes. I see people, or not a few more minutes, but a minute or two, to just continue joining, and then we'll get started with it because I see people are jumping over from one to the other.
They get to hear your wonderful voice again, Amy.
But now I'm talking about revenue cycle. You know that's my favorite. So. And then I think I have all of the options. All right, Ryan, do we want to go ahead and get started on this?
Let's go for it.
All right. Hey, welcome everybody. It is the third session of our week two of the Stroudwater Virtual Call Conference. And I am Amy Graham. I'm here with my colleague Ryan. And it's now time for our session where we're going to talk about transforming the rural healthcare revenue cycle with data-driven dashboards and really looking into that. So with that, want to go ahead and look at what's on the next slide that's going to talk about um, we're going to talk about the foundation, why we have revenue cycle, how to use the data, how to use it, and then what to do with it once you're using it, and then a call to action for everyone. So when we get this started, Hillary, I know that you were backstage. Do you mind kicking off our poll questions for us? The first one, please. Let's see. I'm not seeing our poll questions come up. So with that, and I don't have an option to kick them off myself. So with that, let's go ahead and just keep going then, Ryan. I was going to find out
Well,
who was in the audience here.
yeah, we'll keep rolling, and when they're available, we'll just kind of work them in.
Just circle
Um,
back to it. Yep.
yeah, so like Amy said, we're starting out really with kind of that foundation of that KPIs and analytics. So before we can kind of delve too far into those KPIs, what we do want to first do is really kind of define all those processes within revenue cycle and maybe take that, I'd say 30,000 foot view to really understand again what's going on across the board in these different revenue cycle areas and kind of put that into the back of our mind so we can start thinking about exactly where we would implement some of these things within our revenue cycle. So again, when we think about creating these KPIs, we're talking about some of those quick and easy metrics that really help guide your decision-making processes. And the chart we're looking at here, I'd say really is that high-level view of the overall claim lifecycle. So these are all those activities that are going into creating that claim, starting with those pre-claim activities that you see on that far left-hand side and all those supporting functions that we see as well. And as you kind of walk through this chart in your mind, and some of the other slides we'll see today, just keep in mind, those current processes you do have in place within your revenue cycle. How are these items handled? Are they handled internally? Do you possibly use a vendor for pieces or parts of this? And then what tools do you have in place to monitor how successful or unsuccessful, those parts of your revenue cycle are going? This structured breakdown is pretty important because I think it illustrates, number one, all the parts and pieces that go into your revenue cycle, but then it also kind of helps you understand how they're interconnected, and how those interconnected pieces really kind of drive your revenue. Each phase that you see here on this claim lifecycle does impact the next piece in that process. And then if you have inefficiencies kind of upstream in maybe prior authorization or maybe, inaccuracies within your charge capture process, those really ripple through this entire process, have a major impact on that back end, and will impact your financial health.
Yep.
So just kind of thinking about that and keeping that all in your mind, that really leads into the discussion about KPIs and what analytics do you have in place to kind of monitor, again, how successful or unsuccessful you're being in each of these areas. You can see here from this slide that analytics pillar is kind of on that far right-hand side. But as we kind of walk through this today, again, we will see that usage of those KPIs and those metrics and that analytic nature throughout the entire process and kind of how we use that throughout the entire revenue cycle. So again, as we walk through these next slides, just keep in mind, how are you currently using your KPIs and how can they become a critical piece of your day-to-day decision-making process, and how much can you lean upon them, not only in like your month-end process, but again, for those day-to-day decisions, and how do you use that data to kind of drive your behaviors.
So Ryan, Hillary actually found the poll question. So yes, Hillary, I think you're still there. Can you fire them off for us? Let's see if they'll come up. There we go. So the first question, what is your current level of familiarity with the revenue cycle KPIs? Very familiar, somewhat familiar, you've heard of them, but not sure what they include, or you're not familiar at all. If you go ahead and vote for those, that would be great. And then Hillary, once it gets to a slowed down stop, if you could fire that off for us, that would be great. Show us the results. All right, so very familiar, about 30%, somewhat familiar with the 45%, heard of them but not sure what they include, and then not familiar at all. Alrighty. Let's try the next poll question out there. It's like, the next question, please, Hillary. All right. Does your organization currently use a KPI dashboard to monitor your revenue cycle performance? Yes, we have a well-established dashboard. Yes, but it's still in development or not fully implemented. No, but we're planning to, or no, and we have no immediate plans to. Oh, the votes are still coming in. Oh, must be really coming in.
I think we slowed down a bit.
All right. Do you want to share it? Share the
Yeah.
results then? All right, so we've got about a half of you are yes, you have a well-established, or it's still in development or not fully implemented, and then the remaining are no, with no, but we're planning to, and then no, have no immediate plans to. So it's a good split there. It was about what I was expecting to see. I know that sometimes we do these polling questions and we get a little surprised by the answers that are out there, but it's good to know who's in our audience. And so with that, let's keep going. Talk to us about the KPIs for those who are looking to plan it or further refine it. Ryan, what is
Yeah.
a KPI?
Absolutely. And kind of, I'd say we kind of start at the base for those folks that from that first question that said, I don't have very much familiarity with it, or I don't know what we're talking about. Again, we'll start simply. What is that KPI? A KPI is that measure of a specific item or objective over time. What we're doing with those KPIs is we're looking to measure our financial health, stability, and trajectory, and really give you further value for some of your decision making. Your KPIs that you're looking at should really be tied to at least one business goal. And when we think about what characteristics that we're looking for that make a good KPI, we talk about some of these things that are listed here. You may be familiar with that SMART acronym, where we're looking for items that are specific, measurable, attainable, realistic, and time bound. But we've also thrown a couple other words in here as well. They should be actionable, directional, and accurate. So again, thinking of all those things into place, without getting too elementary here, when you think about your KPIs, they really should meet the criteria of all three words we're talking about here. They should be key, meaning they are tied to something important that is worth paying attention to on a day-to-day basis or a monthly basis. They should be performance related, meaning they help you understand how well some activity or activities are going within your organization, and they focus on something that you at least have some influence over. Your KPI shouldn't be the temperature outside or the weather. How are you going to impact that or do anything with that? And then finally, they should be an indicator, something that you can measure that actually matters to you within your department. Is this item functioning well? Is it not going well? Is it improving? Is it regressing? We'll get into some examples here shortly, but really this kind of sets the stage as to kind of where we're heading and help to understand exactly what you're going to do with those KPIs moving forward. So now you kind of understand, what are they? What's the purpose of these KPIs? Well, first, they will help in trending the success of a process to really, again, show improvement or regression. They can be that quick look into determining, again, are you moving in the right direction? Are you getting worse month to month? Am I getting better in this particular area? Secondly, we look at your KPIs to help you potentially establish a target for your team to strive for. We'll talk about this a little bit later on in the presentation, but best practices around KPIs do include establishing a target or goal that you're looking for each metric. So at least your team knows the standard that they are trying to meet and exactly how close they are getting to reaching that goal. So again, building from that first idea, yes, we may have improved slightly, but are we even close to that desired goal or target, or we still have a long, long ways to go? Another purpose that we look for in these KPIs is to help leaders make informed decisions that are really based on data. This allows us to be more objective in nature as opposed to being subjective or really just kind of going on gut. A lot of your revenue cycle leaders will face some tough decisions, maybe on staffing or other issues, and really using those KPIs become a really helpful tool in that decision-making process. It really can help provide some credence and some evidence for the decisions you're making, and really can be your best support when you're making those tough decisions or going to the board or someone to kind of justify these reasons or kind of changes you're trying to make. And then finally here we see that KPIs can help you when recognize when a process or breaks down or if there's an opportunity for improvement. One of the examples that Amy and I often lean back to is that Change Healthcare fiasco from about a year and a half ago now. Do you have a KPI in place that helps you realize that, hey, my claim submission rate has gone from 98% to 0% overnight? How quickly are we able to identify that? And not along with that, how quickly do I identify it? Can I quantify that in a perspective that says, this is the financial impact that's being, occurring because of this type of situation? So again, as you think about the KPIs that you have in place or that you may be considering putting in place, consider if they are actually providing that value as they should be. Are they meeting the purposes here above, or are they just simply a task that someone is filling out a document or a spreadsheet or an Excel form, monthly, and it just goes out into the nether and no one ever even pays attention to it? So when we think about kind of those reports that are in place to monitor your RCM indicators, what we can talk about is both those process measures as well as your financial measures. Your process measures here on the arrow that's pointing to the left are those that really help to explain how the hospital AR is performing, how successful is my revenue cycle, how well is my AR being, managed effectively. These are the items such as days in AR, I mentioned clean claim percentage, things like these are very critical, but they are separate from your traditional financial measures that you have in place for finance. And those would be your general ledger, your P&L, those things that you see on a monthly basis. But again, as we can see here, they are relatively closely attached. You see that these arrows are kind of tied together, and they do have a significant impact on each other, or at least your process measures do have an impact on your financials. So when you're considering what KPIs we're putting into place, keep in mind those that do have an impact on your general ledger or any other financial reports. Things like how your AR team handles bad debt, when are they taking write-offs, how are they taking write-offs, how are those classified, or maybe charity care. These are the type of things that will have a significant impact to those financial reports as well. And I would say that most organizations probably have a standard traditional financial monthly packet that comes out at the end of every month that does capture all those financial measures. But consider having something in place for those AR processes as well. It may be worth considering creating that formal process measures packet that goes along with those financial measures. So again, you're attacking both sides of this puzzle, and that you do have something in place that helps you understand the financial viability and the health of your claim life cycle in those process measures. So as we think about that, we kind of get into, okay, what is the power of these KPI dashboards, or what can I really gain from putting this into place? I would say the real power and the advantage of these KPIs does involve a couple of these critical items we'll see here. Number one, your KPIs do improve your ability to perform root cause analysis and then trend identification. Your high-level KPIs that may go to your executive team or your CFO, they may not blatantly expose every single issue that you have within your revenue cycle, but they do offer potentially that 30,000-foot view that often in revenue cycle really helps you just get in the right area to correct your problems. What we're really trying to do is move your experts in the right direction and uncover those pockets of opportunity. So as those trends are identified, can your KPIs help those individuals on the front line recognize where to shift their focus and really put their efforts moving forward? I would say an example here to think about is if your cash collections are down significantly month to month, do you have enough data and KPIs in place that, number one, this cash issue is recognized right away, potentially as quickly as the next day. If you have a payer that always pays you on, say, Thursday, and they always pay Thursday, and that's where you get 30% of your cash is coming from that particular payer. If you don't get paid that cash that next Thursday, how quickly does your team recognize this? Is that Thursday? Is it Friday? Or is it not until the end of the month when someone realizes, oh my goodness, we're missing all this cash? Again, the sooner you can recognize these issues, the better you're well equipped to react and adjust accordingly. Secondly, we look at our KPIs in payer relations and communication. And this is maybe an area that you may not think about immediately, but can you use your KPIs and data to recognize, how well a payer is behaving, or I'd probably say not behaving? Are they slow paying you, meaning that they're supposed to pay you in 30 days, but now all of a sudden it's 45 days or it's 60 days or maybe even 90? Or has their denial rate, doubled in the last 6 months? And there's a discussion to be had that, quite honestly, is this payer even providing the value that you expected? And is it worth continuing, in a contract with these payers? Your KPIs really have that power to help you understand what's occurring and kind of battle some of those headaches that your payers probably are causing you. And then I'd say finally here, your KPIs can really be your first line of defense in protecting your AR. The old saying is that what gets measured gets managed, and this really does hold true in revenue cycle as well. So do you have that checks and balances in place to quickly see where you're being successful, where you might have a few gaps in your process, and can you realign your resources to best defend, so to speak, your AR? I would say you have theoretically provided a payable service to this payer, and you are owed payment by your contracted insurances if you have properly met the billing, the coding, and documentation requirements. So again, it really comes down to, do my KPIs help me recognize if my RCM team has done their job? And also, do my KPIs help me recognize if the payer is not holding up their end of the bargain? So with all that, we've kind of walked through the need for KPIs, but what ultimately do they look like? Where do we start? And I would say here we have an example of I'd say a pretty basic generic KPI dashboard that was created in Excel. But even in kind of this, I'd say, pared down model, we can see a couple of those, I'd say, critical items that you would want to see in a KPI dashboard. Number one, Each of these KPIs is listed in that first column. And I would say normally when Amy or myself would put something together like this, each of these would also have directly within that cell or right next to it, or maybe within the notes, exactly how and when this data is pulled. We want to be as concise and detailed as possible. So for example, this first one that says cash collections, it might be something as direct as, my billing manager looks at the cash report that is generated out of the system the day after we close, and they pull the total off of the bottom of page XYZ. You really want to get to that level of granularity and how these numbers are defined and how they're evaluated, so that moving forward, there's no miscommunication or misunderstanding as to how they're being created. The second item that we see here on this KPI dashboard is that each of these metrics does have a goal, and really showing that we do have a documented target that we are aiming for. Now these goals may change somewhat over time, but you at least know what we're aiming for, and everyone that is looking at the dashboard has the same understanding, and they're all aware of this goal. For example, here your days in AR goal may be under 40, and that's what we're showing here. And if you're at 150 days today, maybe you're like, Ryan, that's way too out of whack. There's no possible way we can get to that point. You can set that interim goal at 100 days or 80 days or whatever it may be, and continue to revise that goal until you're down closer to that industry standard of 45 or so. But again, having that goal gives everyone that same understanding of what we're shooting for and what that target is. And then the third item I would say here on this KPI dashboard, maybe not a requirement, but a real nice to have, is that color indicator. We've got that red, yellow, green stoplight looking at us to say, how are we doing? Are we right up close to the goal? Are we way off? Or are we finally, way surpassing that goal and we're in a great situation according to this metric? So again, once we've created this dashboard, it really helps you give an overall idea of the success of your organization. And like this bullet says, what is placed in this KPI report should be agreed upon and help to determine where the focus is going forward. It doesn't simplify the process, but it does help summarize and highlight the areas of opportunity. So again, just another example of a KPI dashboard. And Amy has told me we are running a little time, so we may go through some of these a little bit quicker than normal. But one of the things I would say here is, number one, we want to track what matters. Don't be putting things in your KPI dashboard that no one's going to look at and doesn't really provide any value. We also, when we think about a KPI dashboard in terms of denials, we want to look at it a number of different ways. Maybe by denial type, service line, by different payer. Again, can we identify those pockets of areas that have the most opportunity and really release our AR analysts and our experts to attack those areas to get that cash back in the door? And then the final area here I would say is your KPIs do help you agree on those key areas to prioritize, so that everyone is on the same page and we know where we're moving forward over the next few weeks or months. So Amy, with that, I will pass it over to you to kind of talk on how are we going to use this data? What are we going to do with this, and where do we move forward from here?
So, Ryan, really one of the things that we've heard about lately and seen is that it's all about, do you have the support? And really looking at creating an RCM champion team. When you look at championship activities that are out there on any team that you look at, they've come together as a team. So when you think about traditional revenue cycle processes, you've got the activities that clinical does, IT system configuration, contracting, registration, coding, billing, charge master, maintenance, financial marketing decisions. Those are all happening out there, and all of those areas provide input that creates the claim. And then, if life is grand and everything's good, it goes to the payer gets it, they pay the claim, you never see it again. However, everything that revenue cycle works, falls into what I would call an error, a denial, or some reason that it gets sent that somebody's got to touch it again. And so when you think about it, it makes it all to revenue cycle. And they sit out there in this little island all their own. Sometimes people refer to it as, billing. Well, billing will take care of that. Don't worry about it. They'll pick it up. I don't have to worry about it. I can just put my information in and billing will catch it. The people in billing are going, please, can we just fix some of these things and look at it? So we really want to look at creating a championship team. And by creating that team, that revenue cycle champion, that you create a multidisciplinary approach to monitoring these KPIs. Looking at the dashboard where you say clinical, can we get you involved in this discussion? If the payer comes back and says it's not medically necessary or it's non-covered payer policy, you can talk clinician to clinician and they'll listen to you. The doctor will listen to another physician. A physician to physician conversation goes a whole lot better than a physician to Amy Graham conversation. It's like, oh, she's just over there in revenue cycle. Let's talk to somebody here. And, can you get involved in that? And I'm going to go off script for just a minute. Ryan and I were looking at a report just this morning about prior authorization denials. And it said that 93% for one payer that was out there, 93% of all prior authorization denials, when they are appealed, or this is prior authorizations at the beginning, when they are appealed, are overturned. And that, I will tell you, I would put money on it, that the reason those are overturned is because they have a clinician talking to a clinician, not anyone else, just somebody looking and following a policy, but they have included clinicians in the discussion. And I would say to you, do you have a physician that is always there wanting to know about how their work is going? Get that person involved in it. But then also involve patient access. Help that person that's registering the patient, that's doing the scheduling, the pre-registration. Do they understand that they are the beginning of the process? Do they understand that if they get it in wrong, we don't have a chance of collecting it? It does so much better to have that person involved in it up front, knowing what that is, that patient access team. Do you have somebody who's part of this revenue cycle championship team? The champion team, we're going to come back and get the clinicians, get the patient access all involved, and then we get finance involved. Now, I'll tell you, finance and revenue cycle, I live in two sides of my head some days because I've got an accounting side, but I also have a revenue cycle side. We speak two different languages. Can you get them involved in IT? And by coming together, if we look at these activities, system changes, workflow decisions, things like that, it leads into leadership engagement. So on the next slide, we've listed out, you have strategic alignment, resource allocation. We're not just saying cut, 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 but more, let's put our resources to solving this problem. You have staff empowerment because involved leaders cultivate a culture of accountability, encouraging the staff to improve processes, data-driven decision making, going back to those KPIs, looking at it. Interdepartmental collaboration. It's not revenue cycle out on an island trying to fix it, but actually coming together. And then vendor management. Maybe you're thinking to yourself, Amy, we just outsource all of this. I don't want to worry about it. But if you notice, if you outsource it, they're probably sending you a list of things that you need to correct and what can we do to get that fixed. But by getting this cross-functional team, what happens is on the next slide, we show that, revenue cycle along with these cross-functional decision makers, this revenue cycle champion, they come back and they say, KPIs and reporting trends and the challenges that are seen. These are the activities you need to work on. Feeding it back to that column on the left-hand side, the different departments, giving them guidance and everything, telling them what needs to be done. And then you notice it's a circle there. They then provide support and guidance. They want to have adjusting of policies or behaviors to improve performance. That working all of this together really does take your KPI processes to the next level. And, so then all of you are working together to make sure that you've done everything you can as a team to get those claims out the door. Because I will tell you, by putting this championship team together, this revenue cycle champion, that we want to address it. What you are doing is you are focusing on fixing the problems that are self-inflicted wounds, I call them. You get those fixed because look, at the end of the day, you're trying to get the claim paid. And I'll say it. At the end of the day, the payers are doing what they can to find ways to not pay those claims. I mean, if I were to ask you, you would be able to tell me, here's my number one payer that's my offender, and these are the problems that we're seeing. But by having dashboards in place and looking at it, setting that up, and that information, it really creates that culture of we're going to be the best team and work together to keep the money coming in the door and protecting, the key resource, which is the cash, keeping that coming in the door to feeding into the other areas. Now,
Yeah, and Amy, I
go
would say,
ahead.
you hear often, and maybe not often, but I've heard very often sometimes, like, everyone in the organization is involved in customer service, or everyone's involved in sales. And you
Mm,
think about those organizations here, quite honestly, everyone is involved in revenue cycle as well in some way, shape, or form. You're involved in making sure that your organization is going to be paid. The things that you do on the front end or in prior auth, or even as a clinician, how you're charting, those things do have a significant impact on whether or not you're going to get paid. So again, everyone is a part of this, and that's why it's not just that one-way street to billing takes care of that on the back end. It is a collaborative effort to receive payment from many of these payers, and they're, like Amy mentioned, they're getting harder and harder to work with.
yeah. And what we've done in the next slides, so we've got about 5 or 6 different slides out there about what do you do with the data? Okay, you've got these KPIs, you want to get it started. What are we looking at? And I know someone sent a message a minute ago about what is DNFB and DNFC. It the next coming slides will really show you, how do you get into it, really investigating your trends and anomalies, asking questions, asking why 3 times, who, what, when, where, why, but then go back and go, but why? But why? Because, yeah, skip to the bottom. The first answer isn't the only answer out there. And one of our questions that came through, somebody said, well, what if all my metrics look good? I've got everything in place, but everything looks okay. I'm like, if everything looks okay, you might want to just look at that information a little differently. Is there a specific payer you should look at? Have they changed recently? If it's steady Eddie, chances are it's like a duck in the water. They're steady on the top of the water, but underneath their little feet are moving. Go back and look at your AR for the payers. It could be you've got shifts in the payers and what is happening. I would also say don't just focus on the financial areas. Sometimes you've got to look at the entire process to identify the root cause. Have there been operational changes? And by having your revenue cycle champion in place and working on that, focusing on that, um, by having that champion team, they can look at it and go, oh, wait, we made this operational change. Or the one that's my favorite is, oh, well, we hired a provider 3 months ago. It's like, well, that would be why our provider not found denial has come into place, things like that. So those are things to really look at. And I know we're running short on time, so Ryan, if you just want to spend a second, what do the KPI metrics show? We have different areas on these next slides to look at. So you can see like
Yeah,
discharge, not final build, where to
yeah,
focus your attention and dig into.
yeah, and I won't walk through. A lot of these I'd say more expository. This is really what this metric is showing. I would say that what it may be of more interest as you kind of walk through here is a lot of these we have the how on this far right side here is, okay, I've got, this is my registration rate, this is what it is, and this is why we're tracking this, but how do I put this in place, or how do I improve this metric if it is going awry? So, again, for many of these, like Amy mentioned, we are short of time, but think about exactly and kind of look at some of these opportunities here of these are things that I could potentially do is if my authorization rate seems, out of whack, or I've got really low point of service collections. What could I do, or what could I put in place to evaluate that KPI and make that gradually move in that right direction moving forward? Are you using cost estimation tools? Have you trained your staff on how to have those financial conversations? Is that even a thing that your hospital is currently doing? Maybe that's never been the culture to even have those conversations with the patient. And oh, unfortunately, that's billing's problem later on. They'll deal with that patient at the end. Again, just thinking about for each of these, and we don't, again, like Amy mentioned, we can't walk through each of them, but how do I approach each of these if I am looking to make a significant improvement to this particular metric? And what will that do to my bottom line moving forward?
Yeah. And, this one has the front end. You've got revenue cycle with, you know, uh, the NFB. It's been discharged, not final bill. Charge capture accuracy, coding accuracy, a CDI response rate, how to look at that, and actions that you can take today in these areas. That if you don't know where to start, go to these slides. The slide deck will be distributed. Go to the slides and say, this is a metric. This is where we want to focus on. And then sometimes it may be something easy, like your back end metrics, where you're looking at cash collections. That's an easy way to get the finance team involved, is to say, hey, we want to look at the cash collections rate. What does that look like? Or bad debt rate, days in AR. These are the things that you can look at and focus on to just you know take your organization to the next level. And then finally, I would say, for those of you who have outsourced it and you're like, how do I hold my outsourced vendor accountable? Well, you really want to make sure that you have implement regular performance reviews where you have established targets. This is where you want them to be. You have enhanced vendor oversight and accountability, and points of contact with them, to where they're not just over there working, but you are asking them questions about the KPI information that they are sharing.
Yeah,
So
Amy,
with
you made a really good point earlier with your outsourced vendor. They will push things back to you consistently if you have not created those guardrails as to this is what you're expected to do. This is my part, and these are the exceptions I work. But don't send me back every single thing because you have no idea. Maybe there needs to be a conversation to say, okay, here's exactly what the expectation is moving forward, and go back to your agreement and your contract of what they said they were going to do and hold them to it.
Yep. And then the other thing you could do is, a lot of us have more Medicare Advantage plans coming into place, and you're like, what do I do about Medicare Advantage? How do I deal with them? You can take these KPIs and go back to payer contracting and say, here's the dollar value of total bill claim to denied claims for your payer. You've got a problem that we need to fix, or this is why we no longer want to be in network with you. You can see if they have challenges with medical necessity, prior authorization, going back to our um, article we were just reading this morning, but then also the overall success, the financial health of that payer contract. It could be you've got a really good payer contract, and sometimes you might want to just call them and say thank you, because they're not getting that too often either. And so, with that, we just leave you with a call to action, that you want to make sure that you are developing and monitoring your KPI dashboards, that you're reviewing this information, that you create a revenue cycle champion team that's focused on identifying and addressing those identified issues, not placing blame, but working together to solve it. Drill into the data to strategically address any root causes, because it could be somebody's just fixing it and fixing it and fixing it and going on. And it's like, we could make this system change over here and it would solve that problem and allow you to go work on something else. But then, as an organization, especially with leadership over revenue cycle, commit to continually learning and adapting to new and developing issues that are caused by outside parties. You all are a team together, focused on winning and keeping healthcare local to your community. And what can you do to, address those issues that those outside parties are paying into it? That, you've got to work together to really focus on that. And what I would say is, if anyone has any questions, feel free to put them into the Q&A box. We may not have time right now, but we will go back and answer those questions for you as part of this, and it will be distributed out to everyone. We thank you for your attendance in the webinar today. Here's my contact information as well as Ryan's. And then, just as tying up this concludes the day one of week 2 of our virtual call conference. And we really do thank you for joining us about these conversations with Jeff and Julie, with Keith, and in the transitions between the sessions. We hope that we have left you with insights and tools to support both near term decisions and long term planning. And again, we will see you tomorrow. There are more sessions tomorrow focused on behavioral health, labor and delivery sustainability, and facility strategy. So I'm really looking forward to those. I will see you there. I, again, will be the moderator. So really looking forward to our time together. But thank you, everyone. And I hope you have a fabulous afternoon or rest of your day.
Thank you so much.